10 winters had passed since the fields of Marathon bore witness to Athenian triumph. In that decade, the memory of Persian might had faded like evening shadows against the Grecian hills. Yet fate, that eternal weaver of destinies, had not finished its tapestry of conflict between East and West. The threads of history, momentarily separated, were destined to intertwine once more in a dance of bronze and blood, of wisdom and sacrifice, a tale that would echo through the corridors of time. Darius, the great king whose ambitions had been thwarted at Marathon, had departed to the realm of ancestors, leaving his crown and unfinished conquest to his son Xerxes. The young ruler's inheritance came with the weight of his father's unrealized dreams, a burden as heavy as the royal diadem upon his brow. In the gilded halls of Persepolis, amid the whispers of courtiers and the subtle fragrance of exotic spices, Xerxes contemplated the restoration of his father's honor and the expansion of an empire already spanning 3 continents. The palace of Persepolis stood as a testament to Persian civilization, its columns soaring toward heaven, its walls adorned with reliefs depicting subjects from distant lands bringing tribute to their sovereign lord. Within these walls, council meetings stretched late into the night as advisors debated the wisdom of renewing conflict with the stubborn Greeks. Mardonius, a seasoned general and Xerxes' cousin, advocated for the glory to be won, while the wise Artabanus, Xerxes' uncle, counseled caution. But the allure of conquest proved stronger than warnings of potential disaster, and as months passed, Xerxes' resolve hardened into certainty. Hellas would be added to his empire, whatever the cost. Across the Aegean, in Athens, Theron, once a youth forged in the crucible of the First Persian War, had matured into a respected strategist whose wisdom was sought in council chambers. The lines of experience etched upon his face told of battles won and lessons earned through sacrifice. His hair, once the rich brown of fertile soil, now bore strands of silver at the temples, like the first frost touching autumn leaves. The city he defended had flourished in peace, its marble temples reaching skyward as if in gratitude to the gods who had favored their cause. On mornings when the sea lay calm as polished bronze, Theron would climb the winding path to the Acropolis. From this vantage point, where heaven and earth seemed to converse through the medium of architecture, he would gaze across the city sprawled below, a living testament to what could be achieved when freedom flourished. The agora buzzed with commerce and debate. Philosophers gathered students beneath the shade of olive trees, and artisans bent over their crafts with the precision born of tradition and innovation intertwined. In the harbour of Piraeus, a forest of masts swayed gently with the tide. Athens' growing naval power, championed by the far-sighted Themistocles. This fleet, born from the silver veins of Laurium's mines, represented a new direction for Athenian strength, one that had met resistance from traditionalists, but had found in Theron a stalwart advocate. The wooden walls of these ships would indeed become their salvation should the shadow of Persia fall upon them once more. But winds of change stirred across the Aegean, carrying whispers of a storm gathering in the east. Intelligence arrived on swift ships, brought by merchants who had glimpsed the stirrings of an empire preparing for war. Xerxes was amassing a force unparalleled in human history. The Persian Empire, spanning from the Indus to the Nile, from the steppes of Scythia to the sands of Arabia, had drawn soldiers from every corner of its vast domain. The army that approached was not merely a military force. It was a migration of humanity, diverse in language and custom, but unified under the golden standard of Persia. The first harbingers of this news were dismissed as exaggerations, tales grown in the telling as they passed from port to port. But as more reports arrived, each confirming and expanding upon the last, the reality of the threat became impossible to ignore. In the household of Theron, where olive oil lamps cast gentle light upon walls adorned with painted scenes of pastoral tranquility, a sombre mood descended. His wife, Lyra, a woman whose strength lay in her quiet dignity, sensed the changing currents without needing words to confirm them. Their son, Alexandros, had just reached his 17th year, a youth on the cusp of manhood, with his father's thoughtful gaze and his mother's resolute spirit. Born in the aftermath of Marathon, he had grown up in a city reveling in its hard-won peace, surrounded by tales of heroism that seemed to belong to the realm of myth rather than memory. Now, as the spectre of war loomed once more, he would face the same trial by fire that had shaped his father's generation. Within the hallowed walls of the ecclesia, Athens' assembly of citizens, debates raged like summer fires, fierce and consuming. Some advocated for appeasement, their voices trembling with the memory of Persian arrows darkening the skies. Others, including Theron, stood firm in their resolve. Athens would not bow, would not offer earth and water as symbols of submission to a foreign monarch. No matter how vast his realm or how numerous his armies, this was no ordinary decision. It was a crossroads where the very identity of Athens hung in the balance. Themistocles, whose political acumen was matched only by his vision for Athens' future, spoke with measured conviction of preserving not merely lives, but freedom itself. His words struck chords of resonance within the hearts of those assembled, though not all were immediately swayed. Aristides, called the Just for his unwavering integrity, advocated for caution rather than rashness, for diplomatic efforts rather than immediate confrontation. The debate continued through the day and into the night, passionate yet principled, a testament to the democratic process that set Athens apart from her neighbors and adversaries alike. The decision to resist was not Athens alone to make. Messengers traveled to Sparta and other city-states, bearing pleas for unity against the common threat. In this hour of need, the quarrelsome Greeks found common purpose, though not without hesitation and discord. The Hellenic League formed, a fragile alliance of independent cities united by the shadow of Persian conquest. In Sparta, where warriors were molded from childhood to uphold traditions of military excellence, the decision to join the alliance came not without internal struggle. The ephors, those 5 magistrates who held authority even over Sparta's kings, hesitated to commit forces beyond the Peloponnese. Yet the voice of Leonidas, one of Sparta's dual monarchs, prevailed with the understanding that should Athens fall, Sparta's isolation would become her vulnerability. As couriers returned to Athens with pledges of support, Theron allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. In his courtyard, where fountains murmured soothing melodies and birds sought refuge in the branches of a pomegranate tree, he sat with Kairos, his old companion from Marathon. Time had transformed the once impetuous youth into a bear of a man. His beard now shot through with silver, his laughter less frequent but no less genuine when it came. They reflected on the weight of war, knowing its terrible cost, yet understanding that freedom, once tasted, could never be surrendered without diminishing the essence of what made them men rather than subjects. As winter yielded to spring in the year 480 BCE, the colossal Persian army began its westward march. The earth itself seemed to groan beneath the weight of countless feet, the dust of their passage visible from distant mountain peaks. Xerxes, determined to bridge the divide between continents, commanded a feat of engineering that left even his own generals in awe, a pontoon bridge spanning the Hellespont, where Asia reached toward Europe with fingers of land. Imagine the scene. Massive ships lashed together, side by side, their decks overlaid with timber and earth to form a path across the strait. Cables, thick as a man's arm, twisted from flax and papyrus, strained against the current, anchoring the vessels in place. Engineers directed armies of workers, their skin glistening with sweat beneath the spring sun, their hands calloused from labor that seemed to challenge the very boundaries set by the gods. And overseeing it all, seated upon a throne of gold on a hillside overlooking the strait, Xerxes, son of Darius, king of kings, lord of the four quarters of the earth. When the first contingents of his vast army set foot upon European soil, a sense of destiny fulfilled must have surged through the great king's veins. The procession that followed was a spectacle of imperial might. Infantry from 100 provinces, their armor and weapons as varied as their origins. Cavalry mounted on steeds bred for speed and endurance. Supply wagons laden with provisions to feed multitudes. Even engineers with siege equipment to overcome any fortification that dared stand in their path. Reports of this crossing reached Athens through the network of messengers established by the Hellenic League. In the council chamber, maps were unfurled on tables of polished marble, markers representing known Persian positions adjusted daily as intelligence arrived. Theron studied these movements with the focused concentration of a physician diagnosing a patient's ailment. The Persian advance would likely come through Thessaly, where terrain offered fewer challenges for so large a force. The Greeks would need to prepare defences at Thermopylae, where the narrowness of the pass would negate their enemy's advantage in numbers. Below them, Athens pulsed with preparations for the coming storm. Artisans who once crafted vases and statues now bent their skills to the making of weaponry. Women wove cloaks that would shield their men from the chill of night watches, their fingers working with dexterity born of love and necessity. Children too young to understand the full import of events nevertheless absorbed the tension that permeated the very air, their games taking on martial themes that mimicked the adult world around them. In the household of Theron, Alexandros prepared for his first taste of battle with the solemnity of youth on the threshold of irreversible change. Lyra helped him don his armor, a breastplate burnished to a soft glow, greaves that protected legs still lean with adolescence, a helmet adorned with a crest of horsehair dyed the deep blue of the Aegean. As she worked, her hands steady, despite the fear that must have clutched at her heart, she sang softly, an ancient melody from her childhood, its lyrics speaking of homecomings and hearth fires burning in welcome. The strategy that emerged from councils of war was born of necessity and intimate knowledge of their homeland. The narrow pass of Thermopylae, the hot gates, would be where Greek hoplites would make their stand on land, while the Strait of Artemisium would witness the clash of triremes upon the wine-dark sea. In these confined spaces, Persian numbers would count for less. allowing Greek discipline and valor to level the uneven odds. When summer reached its zenith, with fields golden under Helios's gaze, the Persian host arrived at Thermopylae. Leading the Greek defenders was Leonidas of Sparta, with his 300 chosen warriors and contingents from other cities, including Thespiae and Phocis. These men, standing as the vanguard of Greek resistance, knew the likely outcome of their mission, yet embraced it with the stoic acceptance that has become synonymous with Spartan ethos. Theron, assigned to the Athenian naval forces at Artemisium, bid farewell to those who would hold the narrow path. Among the departing soldiers was a contingent of young Athenians, Alexandros among them, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and determination as they prepared to witness warfare's terrible spectacle for the first time. This parting between father and son was laden with unspoken emotions: pride, love, the desperate hope for reunion. As the land forces marched northward to their appointed post, Theron joined the crews, boarding the triremes that would sail to Artemisium. These vessels, sleek as predatory fish, represented Athens's investment in naval power, an investment championed by Themistocles against significant opposition. Each ship carried a complement of oarsmen, marines, and archers, their combined efforts transforming wood and sail into instruments of war. The journey northward along the coast of Euboea allowed time for reflection. Theron, standing at the prow of his assigned vessel, watched as dolphins played in the bow wave, their sleek bodies arcing through azure waters with a grace that seemed to mock the clumsiness of human endeavors. The coastline slipped past, rocky promontories giving way to sheltered coves, fishing villages perched on hillsides, olive groves silvered by sea breezes. It was a landscape worth defending, not merely for its beauty, but for the way of life it nurtured. At Artemisium, the Greek fleet took position, triremes arranged with the precision of a phalanx adapted to maritime conditions. Across the strait, the Persian navy gathered, a forest of masts and sails representing maritime traditions from Egypt to Phoenicia, from Cyprus to the coastal cities of Ionia. The disparity in numbers was sobering, yet the Greek commanders maintained outward confidence, knowing that morale would be as crucial as tactics in the coming engagement. The battle that unfolded at Thermopylae has passed into legend, a tale whispered with reverence around hearth fires for generations to come. For 7 days, the narrow pass became the focal point of two civilizations in collision. Greek shields formed an unyielding wall against which waves of Persian attackers broke like sea foam upon rocky shores. The martial prowess of Sparta's warriors, complemented by the courage of their allies, transformed a geographical bottleneck into an abattoir where Persian numerical superiority counted for naught. Messengers brought reports of the land battle to the fleet at Artemisium, tales of Spartan discipline holding firm against multiple assaults, of Persian immortals themselves repulsed with heavy losses, of Xerxes watching in frustrated rage as his mighty host was stymied by a force a fraction of its size. These accounts bolstered the spirits of the naval forces as they prepared for their own trial by combat. Even as Thermopylae played host to heroism and sacrifice, the waters of Artemisium churned with naval conflict. Athenian triremes, sleek and maneuverable, darted between larger Persian vessels. Theron, commanding one such ship, witnessed the fury of Poseidon as a storm claimed Persian ships by the score, divine intervention tilting scales too imbalanced for mortal strength alone. The naval battle unfolded over 3 days, a struggle as much against the elements as against the enemy. On the first day, Greek ships formed a defensive circle, their bronze-sheathed rams pointing outward like the spines of a sea urchin. Persian vessels seeking to encircle this formation found themselves fighting against coastal currents unfamiliar to their pilots. Night brought no respite, for a summer storm descended upon the strait, its winds howling like spirits of the unquiet dead. Lightning split the darkness, illuminating waves that rose like liquid mountains before crashing down with devastating force. The Greek ships, sheltered in the lee of Euboea, weathered the tempest with minimal losses. The Persian fleet, anchored in more exposed waters, suffered grievously. Dozens of vessels dashed against rocks or capsized by the fury of the elements. Dawn revealed a sea littered with debris, splintered timbers, waterlogged supplies, bodies of drowned sailors carried by currents toward distant shores. The Persians, despite these losses, still maintained numerical superiority and renewed their attack with vengeful determination. For 2 more days, the waters around Artemisium became a theatre of desperate courage, tactical innovation, and the cruel impartiality of fate. Theron's trireme participated in a maneuver that would later be adopted as standard naval tactics. Several Greek ships, including his own, arranged themselves in a line abreast and charged directly at a larger Persian formation. At the last moment, they veered apart, causing confusion in the enemy ranks. As Persian ships attempted to pursue individual targets, they lost cohesion, allowing Greek vessels to isolate and ram them one by one. During one such engagement, Theron's ship rammed a Phoenician vessel amidships, the bronze-sheathed prow splintering through the enemy ship's hull with a sound like the cracking of massive bones. As the vessels locked together momentarily before disengaging, Theron caught a glimpse of the fear in the eyes of a young Persian officer, a reminder that beneath the grand narratives of imperial ambition and defensive heroism lay the simple truth of individual human beings facing mortality. But even the gods could not entirely halt the Persian advance. On the 7th day of battle at Thermopylae, a local shepherd named Ephialtes, motivated by the promise of reward, revealed to the Persians a hidden path that circumvented the pass. This act of betrayal, his name forever after synonymous with treachery, allowed Persian forces to outflank the Greek defenders. Leonidas, learning of this development, dismissed the bulk of his allies, keeping with him only his Spartans and those Thespians and Thebans who chose to remain. Their sacrifice, a deliberate decision to stand against insurmountable odds, bought precious time for the rest of Greece to prepare its defences. The news of Thermopylae's fall reached the Greek fleet at Artemisium through a swift messenger vessel. With the land route now open to the Persian advance, the strategic value of maintaining the naval position at Artemisium diminished. Themistocles ordered a withdrawal southward towards Salamis. As the Greek fleet sailed past the cape of Artemisium, Theron gazed toward the distant shore where Thermopylae lay. Though too far to discern details, he imagined he could see the final stand of Leonidas and his men, a circle of shields growing ever smaller as Persian arrows and spears took their toll. It was an image that would remain with him through the trials yet to come, a standard of sacrifice against which all future actions would be measured. The withdrawal was not without incident. Persian ships, emboldened by the news from Thermopylae, pursued the Greek fleet along the coast of Euboea. Rearguard actions became necessary, with Greek triremes turning to engage pursuers, buying time for their comrades to continue southward. During one such skirmish, Theron's ship faced 3 Persian vessels simultaneously. Through a combination of skilled seamanship and the desperate courage of men fighting to protect their retreat, they managed to sink one pursuer and damage another before breaking off engagement. Athens, lying open to the Persian path, faced a decision unprecedented in its history. The oracle at Delphi had spoken of wooden walls as the city's salvation, an enigmatic message interpreted by Themistocles as their fleet of ships. With heavy hearts, Athenians abandoned their beloved city, carrying what treasures they could to the island of Salamis. The evacuation of Athens was an undertaking of logistical complexity, matched only by the emotional toll it exacted. Families gathered what possessions could be transported: religious icons, ancestral heirlooms, essential tools of livelihood. Carts creaked beneath loads balanced precariously, drawn by oxen or pulled by human hands along roads choked with the dust of thousands of footsteps. The elderly moved with painful slowness, supported by the young whose own burdens were lightened by the strength of youth, but made heavier by the uncertainty of their future. From Salamis, they watched as Persian flames claimed Athens, smoke rising like a funeral shroud above the Parthenon. The sacred olive tree within Athena's temple, said to have been planted by the goddess herself, was burned to a blackened husk. Yet even amid this desecration, a symbol of hope emerged. For the very next day, witnesses reported seeing a green shoot sprouting from the burned trunk, a living testament to the resilience that characterized the Athenian spirit. In this darkest hour, a plan took shape within Themistocles' mind, a strategy born of desperation and genius. The narrow strait between Salamis and the mainland would be where fate would be decided, not through direct confrontation of unequal forces, but through guile and intimate knowledge of local waters. Themistocles understood not only the maritime conditions that would favor Greek ships, but also the psychology of his adversary, Xerxes' need to achieve a decisive victory to maintain the momentum of his campaign. Through calculated misinformation, delivered by a trusted slave sent to the Persian camp with a message of feigned betrayal, Themistocles lured the Persian fleet into the confined waters of the strait. Xerxes, eager to believe that elements within the Greek coalition were ready to defect, ordered his navy to blockade both entrances to the strait, preventing any Greek escape during the night. This very act of encirclement created the conditions for Persian defeat. As dawn broke over the strait on that fateful day in late September, Greek triremes surged forward from their concealed positions along Salamis's shoreline. The Persian fleet, which had maintained station through the night in anticipation of preventing Greek escape, found itself in disarray. Ships crowded together in narrow waters, captains unable to maneuver effectively. The numerical advantage that should have guaranteed victory transformed into a liability. The waters turned crimson as Theron and his fellow Athenians fought with the ferocity of those defending not merely land, but an entire way of life. Greek triremes, their crews rested after a night in port, rammed Persian vessels whose oarsmen were exhausted from maintaining position through the hours of darkness. The bronze rams tore through enemy hulls, opening mortal wounds in the wooden bodies of ships that began to list and sink, spilling their crews into waters already crowded with the flotsam of battle. Theron's ship claimed 3 Persian vessels, the skill of his helmsman allowing them to strike and disengage before enemy marines could board in significant numbers. From his position on the command deck, Theron witnessed individual acts of heroism amid the larger tapestry of the battle. An oarsman continuing to pull his weight despite an arrow protruding from his shoulder. A marine leaping aboard an enemy vessel to clear its deck single-handedly. A helmsman steering with uncanny precision despite the chaos surrounding him. By day's end, the sea was littered with shattered vessels and floating debris, the remnants of Persian naval power. Hundreds of ships had been sunk, thousands of sailors and marines drowned or captured. Xerxes, watching from a golden throne upon the shore, witnessed the unraveling of his ambitions. The great king, his fleet crippled and his supply lines vulnerable, made the fateful decision to retreat with the bulk of his forces, leaving his general Mardonius to continue the campaign with a smaller army. For Theron, the aftermath of Salamis brought news both bitter and sweet. Alexandros had survived the engagement at Thermopylae, escaping with the contingent dismissed by Leonidas before the final stand. The young man returned to his father, changed, no longer the youth who had set forth with dreams of glory, but a warrior who had witnessed the reality of combat and found it both more terrible and more ennobling than he had imagined. Winter came, bringing respite from conflict, but no resolution to the Persian threat. Mardonius and his forces withdrew to the plains of Thessaly, where they would await the spring to resume their campaign. The fertile lands of this region provided sustenance for the remaining Persian army, a force still numbering in the tens of thousands despite the losses incurred during the initial invasion. The Greeks used this interlude to strengthen their alliance, to heal wounds both physical and spiritual, and to prepare for the campaign that spring would bring. Throughout this period, Theron divided his time between military preparations and brief visits to Troezen, where Lyra awaited news with the patient fortitude that had characterized her response to the war's upheavals. Their reunions provided anchors of normality in lives disrupted by conflict, simple meals shared in borrowed quarters, walks along unfamiliar shorelines, conversations that deliberately avoided dwelling on the uncertainties that lay ahead. When soft breezes heralded the return of spring in 479 BCE, the largest Greek army ever assembled marched northward to confront the Persian force. Nearly 40,000 hoplites, representing 24 city-states, moved with the disciplined precision that had become the hallmark of Greek warfare. Their shields gleamed in the spring sunshine, each emblazoned with the emblem of its owner's city. The lambda of Lacedaemon, the owl of Athens, the club of Thebes, symbols of individual identity united in common purpose. Near the small town of Plataea, beneath the shadow of Mount Theron, the final confrontation of the Second Persian War would unfold. The terrain here was varied, open plains that favored Persian cavalry giving way to broken ground where Greek infantry could negate that advantage, streams that would influence the positioning of forces, gentle hills that offered opportunities for tactical oversight of the developing battle. Theron, having survived Salamis, now stood among the Athenian hoplites, his shield bearing the owl of Athena. Beside him was Alexandros, no longer the untested youth who had marched to Thermopylae, but a seasoned warrior whose eyes had witnessed both the darkness of war and the light of sacrifice that gave it meaning. Around them were men who had known nothing but war and threat since early youth, their faces weathered but their eyes clear with purpose. Across the field, Persian standards fluttered in the wind, exotic and colourful against the muted landscape of Boeotia. For days the armies manoeuvred cautiously, each seeking favourable ground. Mardonius, commanding the Persian forces, attempted to lure the Greeks into open terrain where his cavalry could operate effectively. Pausanias, the Spartan regent who held overall command of the Greek forces, countered these efforts with patient restraint, maintaining positions where the advantage of Persian mobility would be minimized. This strategic dance continued through the waning days of summer, a prelude to the inevitable clash of civilizations. Dawn arrived with the clarity that often precedes momentous events, the landscape revealed in crisp detail as the sun's first rays crested Mount Theron. A series of incidents, some planned, others the result of chance, precipitated the battle that had been building through days of maneuver and counter-maneuver. A raid on Greek supply lines by Persian cavalry provoked a response that escalated beyond its initial scope. What began as a skirmish expanded as reinforcements were committed by both sides, the engagement growing like a flame fed by wind until the full armies were drawn into conflict. When battle was finally joined in earnest, it was with a fury that seemed to shake the earth. Across ground still damp with morning dew, the opposing forces surged toward each other, a human tide of bronze and iron, of flesh and bone, of courage and fear. The sound was tremendous, a cacophony of clashing metal, thudding shields, shouted commands, and the wordless cries of men embracing their most primal emotions. The discipline of Greek phalanxes prevailed against Persian cavalry and infantry, their coordinated movements a dance of bronze and iron that spoke of countless hours of training. Each hoplite was part of a greater whole, his shield protecting not only himself but the comrade to his left, his spear striking not merely for personal glory but for the integrity of the formation. This unity of purpose transformed individual warriors into a collective entity that moved and fought with the precision of a single organism. Theron found himself at the heart of the Athenian contingent, the familiar rhythm of combat settling over him like a second skin. There was a strange comfort in the simplicity of battle, where complex philosophical and political considerations gave way to the elemental struggle for survival. His spear thrust and withdrew with practiced efficiency, each movement calculated to maintain the integrity of the phalanx while exacting maximum toll on the enemy. Beside him, Alexandros fought with the combination of technique and instinct that marked a natural warrior, his youth lending speed and his experience providing judgment. As the battle progressed, the Persian resistance began to falter. Mardonius, recognizing the turning tide, committed his reserves in a desperate attempt to restore momentum. Mounted on a white charger that seemed to float above the chaos of the battlefield, the Persian commander led from the front, his golden armor gleaming like a beacon. It was a display of personal courage that commanded respect even from those who opposed his cause. But courage alone could not overcome the discipline and determination of the Greek forces. As Mardonius pressed forward into the thick of combat, he became separated from his bodyguard, a momentary isolation that proved fatal. A javelin, cast by an unknown hand from within the Spartan ranks, found the gap between breastplate and helmet. Mardonius fell, his body lost beneath the press of advancing hoplites, his death marking the beginning of the end for Persian resistance. By mid-afternoon, what had been a battle transformed into a rout. Persian forces broke and fled, seeking safety in their fortified camp or in the promise of distance from the battlefield. The Greek pursuit was methodical rather than frenzied, maintaining formation even in victory, a discipline that prevented the overextension that might have turned triumph into disaster. Theron, moving forward with the Athenian contingent, witnessed the aftermath of conflict spreading across the plain of Plataea. Bodies lay where they had fallen, Greek and Persian alike rendered equal in death as they had never been in life. Amidst this tapestry of suffering, individual acts of compassion emerged. A Greek warrior offering water to a dying Persian, a physician tending wounds without regard for the nationality of his patients, comrades carrying fallen friends from the field with gentle hands that belied their recent violence. Even in victory, the cost was evident in the faces of survivors, a solemn acknowledgement that what had been won came at a price, measured in blood and lives. From the north came news of yet another triumph. At Mycale, Greek forces had destroyed the beached Persian fleet and defeated the forces guarding it. This dual victory, like twin blades of a scissors cutting through the fabric of Persian ambition, effectively ended the Second Persian War. Xerxes's dream of adding Greece to his empire lay in ruins, as tangible as the wreckage of ships and the bodies of fallen soldiers now returning to the earth from which they came. In the aftermath, as cities rebuilt and fields renewed their bounty, Theron returned once more to Athens. Standing amidst the ruins of the Acropolis, he watched as citizens laid the first stones of what would become a more magnificent Parthenon, a temple not merely to Athena, but to the enduring spirit of a people who had faced annihilation and emerged transcendent. Lyra joined him there, returned from Troezen with emotions as complex as his own, relief at reunion, sorrow for all that had been lost, determination to contribute to the rebuilding of their beloved city. Together they stood amid scaffolding and half-carved marble blocks, witnesses to the resilience that defines the human spirit at its finest. The Second Persian War had ended, its conclusion writing the prelude to what historians would later call the Golden Age of Athens. From the crucible of conflict emerged art, philosophy, and democracy that would illuminate the path of Western civilization for millennia to come. The dramatists, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides would craft tragedies that explored the depths of human experience. Philosophers would question the nature of reality and justice in an ongoing dialogue that continues to this day. Architects and sculptors would create works of such perfection that they remain touchstones of aesthetic achievement. Theron, his hair now fully silvered by the passage of years, would live to see the flowering of this cultural renaissance. As an elder statesman, he contributed his wisdom to the governance of Athens under the leadership of Pericles, that visionary who understood that true greatness lies not in conquest but in creation. Alexandros, recovered from his wounds at Plataea, followed a path that diverged from yet honored his father's legacy, drawn to the emerging philosophical schools that questioned the nature of existence and humanity's place within it. In his final years, Theron understood, with the clarity that sometimes comes only in life's final chapter, that the true victory of Greece over Persia was not merely military, but philosophical. The Persian Empire, for all its material splendor and administrative efficiency, represented a world where individuals existed to serve the state and its divine monarch. Greece, and Athens in particular, offered an alternative vision, one where the state existed to serve its citizens, where individuals could question authority and tradition without fear, where human potential might be fulfilled in art and thought as much as in war and commerce. When death finally came to him, it arrived not as the violent intruder he had often faced on battlefields, but as a gentle companion, escorting him from one state of being to another with the same dignity that had characterized his life. And so, as stars appeared in the velvet expanse above the Aegean, the tale of the Second Persian War became part of the eternal tapestry of human striving, a testament to the courage of those who dared to stand against overwhelming odds for the sake of their children's tomorrows.